Denka reaches a settlement with the EPA over allegations it improperly stored and disposed of hazardous waste at its plant in St. John Parish. The EPA announced the settlement on July 2nd, saying that Denka mishandled waste containing chloroprene at its facility near LaPlace. The agency says that the improper disposal of this waste allowed high levels of emissions, exposing workers and the surrounding community there to potential health risks. As part of the agreement, Denka will pay a nearly $1 million civil penalty and verify the remaining liquid and solid waste has been removed from an outdoor brine pit and related equipment. Denka suspended its operations at the plant in 2025.